"You're making a huge mistake," Karen threatened as she stood in my garage, measuring my workbench with a ruler like some demented home inspector. "This unauthorized workshop violates 3 separate covenants, and I have the authority to seize your tools as evidence." That's what the HOA president said before she discovered I wasn't just another suburban dad tinkering with weekend projects. I was a forensic accountant who just finished exposing a $50 million Medicare fraud ring, and watching this petty dictator threaten to steal my property was like watching someone confess to crimes they didn't even know they were committing. While Karen flexed her imaginary legal powers, my CPA license and fraud investigation credentials sat quietly in my home office upstairs. I'd been tracking financial irregularities for the FBI for 15 years, and everything about this woman's operation screamed systematic embezzlement. I smiled politely, started documenting everything, and began building the case that would expose the biggest HOA fraud scheme in state history. What would you do if your HOA president tried to confiscate your personal property? Drop a comment and stick around because you're about to witness the most satisfying financial takedown ever recorded. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this nightmare. My name is David Chen, and I've been hunting white-collar criminals for 15 years. Started as a junior auditor, worked my way up through forensic accounting, and now I specialize in uncovering complex financial fraud for federal agencies. It's detailed work, lots of spreadsheets and database analysis, the kind of job where you spend months following money trails through shell companies and offshore accounts. Most neighbors think I work in IT or something boring. Always hunched over my computer, drowning in coffee that's gone cold hours ago, muttering about suspicious transactions and hidden assets. I moved to Oakwood Meadows 18 months ago after my divorce was finalized. My twin boys, Jake and Michael, needed consistency after their mother and I split up. They're 14 now, good kids who deserved a stable neighborhood with decent schools and quiet streets where their biggest worry is making the JV basketball team. The house isn't anything fancy, but it's got a 2-car garage I converted into a workshop where I restore vintage motorcycles, the smell of motor oil and metal polish, the satisfaction of rebuilding engines piece by piece. It's my therapy after long days hunting financial predators. Then there's Karen Blackwell. Imagine every nightmare HOA story you've ever heard, compress it into one person, and give her an accounting background that makes her twice as dangerous. This woman is mid-40s, drives a pristine white Lexus that she parks diagonally across 2 spaces, and has been HOA president for 6 years running. She's got this habit of showing up at your door wearing designer suits that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, carrying a leather portfolio like she's conducting SEC investigations instead of measuring grass height. Real estate investor by profession, neighborhood overlord by obsession. She owns 4 rental properties in the development and sits on the architectural review board like it's the Supreme Court. 4 months ago, I installed a motorcycle lift in my garage. Simple hydraulic system, completely contained within my own property, got all the proper electrical permits from the city. The installation took 1 weekend and didn't affect anyone else's property or views. But Karen didn't just notice. She conducted what she called a comprehensive structural analysis that involved bringing a contractor to examine my foundation without permission. A $125 fine for unauthorized mechanical installations affecting structural integrity. I submitted engineering reports, city permits, and insurance documentation proving everything was safe and legal. Didn't matter. Appeal denied faster than a bad loan application. Her exact words: residential garages aren't zoned for commercial-grade equipment, regardless of permitting status. Commercial-grade equipment, because apparently restoring motorcycles in my own garage constitutes running an unlicensed business. From a woman whose rental properties generate actual commercial income in a residential zone. I paid the fine. Look, I was deep into a complex embezzlement case involving a medical supply company. Jake and Michael were adjusting to the custody schedule. I had bigger financial crimes to solve. $125 to make this lunatic disappear seemed like cheap insurance. But here's what I learned about financial predators in 15 years of forensic work. They interpret payment as validation. They see vulnerability like sharks smell blood in the water. 3 weeks later, I worked late tracking suspicious wire transfers and forgot to move my motorcycle from the driveway back into the garage. It sat outside overnight, maybe 8 hours total. The certified mail arrived like a subpoena, envelope thick with official documents. Another fine, this time $200, doubled because I was now classified as a repeat commercial violator, plus a warning about escalating enforcement protocols for persistent noncompliance with residential zoning standards. Escalating enforcement protocols. I'm staring at this letter after a 12-hour day following money through Cayman Island shell companies, and this woman's threatening me over a motorcycle in my own driveway. The absurdity hit me like a failed audit. I've investigated billions in hidden assets, tracked money laundering operations across 3 continents, and my biggest problem is supposed to be where I park my Honda Shadow. But I still didn't realize I was dealing with something much bigger than power-hungry control freaks. Saturday morning, 8 a.m. sharp, I'm reviewing bank statements over coffee when I hear voices in my driveway. Through the window, I see Karen marching toward my garage with a clipboard and digital camera, followed by someone I'd never seen before wearing what looks like a security uniform from a costume shop. This guy, maybe 30, built like he spends his unemployment checks on protein powder, has a badge that says Compliance Officer and the attitude of someone who thinks HOA violations are federal crimes. His name tag reads Derek Morrison, and he's strutting around my property like he's serving warrants instead of measuring fence heights. I open the garage door and Karen launches into her prepared speech without so much as acknowledging it's my property she's trespassing on. Mr. Chen, we're conducting a compliance audit of your unauthorized workshop operation. Your mechanical equipment and part storage exceed residential usage parameters. She's photographing my tool cabinet like it's evidence at a crime scene, measuring my workbench with the precision of a surveyor. You have 72 hours to remove all commercial equipment or face a $500 fine plus daily penalties. $500 for owning tools in my own garage. I take a sip of coffee, still warm enough to be comforting, which somehow makes this conversation surreal instead of infuriating. Good morning to you too, Karen. That's interesting legal theory. What specific covenant prohibits homeowners from having workshops? The question hits her like an unexpected audit finding, and I watch her face tighten with the particular frustration that comes from having your authority questioned by someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Recent amendments to our governing document supersede grandfathered usage patterns, she announces with the confidence of someone who's never had their financial statements actually scrutinized. Derek nods like she just quoted securities law instead of making up regulations on the spot. The morning air carries the scent of fresh mulch from someone's landscaping project, while these two treat my garage like the scene of an international money laundering operation. Now, back in my forensic training, they taught us about something called burden of proof. Basically, when someone makes financial accusations, they need documentation to support their claims. I'd spent enough time in courtrooms to know that vague references to recent amendments usually meant someone was fabricating authority they didn't actually possess. So I decided to test Karen's legal knowledge the same way I'd challenge suspicious accounting entries. I'd be happy to review the exact language of these recent amendments, I say, keeping my voice level like I'm questioning a hostile witness. Could you provide copies of the board meeting minutes where these changes were approved? Karen's eye twitches just slightly, but 15 years of reading financial statements teaches you to catch those subtle tells when numbers don't add up. Mr. Chen, I've been managing this community for 6 years. I think I understand our governing documents. I'm sure you do. Just suggesting we document everything properly. Cross the T's, dot the I's, make sure the paperwork supports the enforcement action. That's when Derek decides to contribute his vast legal wisdom to the conversation. Sir, we don't need your permission to enforce community standards. We have full regulatory authority here. Full regulatory authority. This guy who probably learned legal procedure from Judge Judy thinks he's got federal jurisdiction. What kind of training did you receive for this position? I ask, genuinely curious about his qualifications. His face reddens faster than a failed financial audit. I completed comprehensive HOA enforcement certification through an accredited online program. The pause stretches long enough to hear his confidence evaporating. Karen steps between us like she's preventing an SEC investigation. Mr. Morrison was hired through proper channels and has full board approval for all enforcement activities. Hired through proper channels. I'm filing that phrase away in my mental evidence folder, right next to accredited online program and regulatory authority. Well, then I'm sure you won't mind if I request copies of the board resolution approving his position and his employment contract, public records and all that. The silence stretches long enough for a delivery truck to rumble past. Diesel engine echoing off the houses like thunder in the distance. Karen's designer suit makes that expensive rustling sound as she shifts her weight, clearly not expecting anyone to actually question her documentation. Mr. Chen, you seem to be looking for problems where none exist. We're simply trying to maintain property values for everyone's benefit. I appreciate that goal, but before I remove tools I've owned for 10 years, I'd like to see the actual covenant language. Seems reasonable, right? Derek starts to say something, but Karen cuts him off with a look that could freeze coffee. Here's where things get interesting. Instead of backing down like she probably expected, I just smiled and pulled out my phone. Actually, let me just record this conversation for my own records. You know, documentation purposes. The effect was immediate and beautiful. Karen's confident demeanor cracked like a poorly constructed financial statement. That won't be necessary, she says quickly. You'll receive all necessary documentation with your formal violation notice. 72 hours, Mr. Chen. We'll be conducting daily inspections until this matter is resolved. Daily inspections. As they walk away, I notice Derek's taking photos not just of my garage, but of my house, my windows, my car. The sound of his camera shutter clicking carries in the morning air like some kind of suburban surveillance operation. I close the garage door and finish my coffee, which has gone lukewarm, but I'm not worried about temperature. I'm thinking about those board meeting minutes I just requested and wondering why two simple questions about documentation made them both so nervous. Something tells me this workshop situation is about to get a lot more interesting. 3 days later, I'm pulling into my driveway after a long day analyzing suspicious bank transfers when my phone rings. City Code Enforcement asking about a complaint regarding my garage allegedly being used for unlicensed automotive repair services. Here's the thing, I restore motorcycles as a hobby, never charged anyone a dime, never advertised services, just a guy fixing vintage bikes in his spare time. When I explain this, the inspector sounds genuinely confused and says they'll close the complaint as unfounded. But somebody clearly wasted city resources with a bogus report targeting my hobby. The next morning, Jake comes downstairs looking like someone punched him in the stomach. Dad, why are kids at school asking if we're running some kind of illegal business? Turns out Karen's been making rounds at the weekend block parties, dropping casual hints about all the suspicious activity at the Chen house, how many different motorcycles show up for repairs, how men with tools have business meetings in my garage, how it makes other families uncomfortable about property values. What's brilliant about her strategy is that most neighbors have no clue I'm a forensic accountant. They see vintage bikes coming and going, guys with tools helping with restorations, meetings in my garage discussing carburetors and electrical systems. And thanks to Karen's whisper campaign, they're starting to think I'm running everything from an unlicensed repair shop to a motorcycle chop shop operation. The irony would be hilarious if my sons weren't getting suspicious looks at the school bus stop. That's when I decide to attend Tuesday night's HOA board meeting as an observer. I slip into the back of the community center conference room, phone discreetly recording, perfectly legal at public meetings, something I learned during a corruption investigation where a city councilman was skimming maintenance contracts. The stale coffee smell mixed with industrial carpet cleaner reminds me of every municipal building interrogation I've ever conducted. Watching Karen run this meeting is like witnessing a masterclass in financial manipulation disguised as parliamentary procedure. Robert's Rules of Order, formal motions, detailed financial reports, all to decide whether the community should spend $3,000 on new pool furniture or upgraded lighting. But during the treasurer's report, something catches my attention like a red flag in a suspicious audit. The numbers don't add up. Karen's presenting monthly expenses that are 40% higher than the previous year, but the line items are vague. Maintenance and improvements, $12,000. Professional services, $8,500. Security and compliance, $6,200. In forensic accounting, we call this aggregation without justification, hiding specific expenses in broad categories that prevent detailed analysis. But here's what really triggered my fraud detection instincts. Derek Morrison's listed as receiving $2,500 monthly for compliance enforcement services, but there's no contract on file, no scope of work defined, no performance metrics. Meanwhile, the actual landscaping company that maintains common areas gets $1,800 for work that's clearly documented and competitively bid. A fake security guard making more than licensed contractors with legitimate services. After the meeting, I do what any good forensic accountant does when the numbers smell fishy. I dig into the public records. 20 Minutes on the county website reveals that Oakwood Meadows HOA has been filing financial statements that don't match the reports Karen presents to residents. The official state filings show $45,000 less in annual expenses than what she claims the association spends. The discrepancy pattern is so obvious it's practically screaming fraud. According to state records, the HOA should have $67,000 in reserves. According to Karen's internal reports, they have $23,000. That's a $44,000 gap that would make any auditor's alarm bells ring like fire sirens. The next day brings Karen's boldest move yet. She shows up with Derek and an official-looking document announcing a special assessment of $750 per household for security infrastructure upgrades. The paperwork looks impressive. HOA letterhead, legal language, professional formatting. But here's the kicker. She claims my commercial workshop operation creates unique security challenges requiring additional protective measures for the community. What exactly makes you think I'm running a commercial operation? I ask, genuinely fascinated by her financial creativity. She gives me this conspiratorial look like we're discussing insider trading instead of motorcycle restoration. Mr. Chen, we're not naive. Multiple vehicles, men conducting business transactions at all hours, cash payments for services. We simply want to protect property values. The way she says it, you'd think I was running a money laundering operation instead of helping friends restore vintage Harleys in my garage on weekends. While she's explaining how my suspicious business model threatens community standards, I notice Derek outside taking photos through my fence, trying to document my commercial inventory. Here's where I make my countermove. Instead of arguing or demanding explanations, I calmly sign the assessment notice. "I'll have payment to you by Friday," I tell her, watching her face light up with premature victory. She thinks she's finally found the pressure point that'll make me crack. What Karen doesn't realize is that she just handed me the final piece of evidence I needed. Every fraudulent assessment, every manufactured enforcement action, every illegal fee, it's all building into a fraud case that would make any prosecutor salivate. She's so focused on forcing me out that she's forgotten basic accounting principles. Every transaction leaves a paper trail, and systematic theft always follows detectable patterns. As they walk away, Karen's already planning her next move, probably calculating how much she'll profit when I'm forced to sell below market value. But I'm thinking about something else entirely. How satisfying it's going to be when this whole financial house of cards comes crashing down around her ears. The best part? She's creating all the evidence I need to destroy her. Friday morning, I'm dragging myself through the front door after an all-night analysis session when I find another manila envelope taped to my door like a legal summons. Inside is Karen's latest masterpiece, a security enhancement assessment targeting my property specifically, $750 for elevated monitoring protocols due to high-risk factors associated with unregulated commercial activities. Unregulated commercial activities. This woman's been watching too much CSI, Financial Crimes Unit. The breakdown reads like a security contractor's fantasy. Additional cameras, motion sensors, and my personal favorite, specialized surveillance equipment trained on non-compliant properties. All because some friends occasionally stop by to help restore motorcycles and share a beer while we work on engines. The document has official stamps, reference numbers, everything except actual legal authority. Timeline. 14 days, or they'll place a lien on my house. A lien for refusing to pay protection money to fund surveillance of my own property. While I'm marveling at this financial fiction, Michael comes downstairs looking like he's been crying. Derek's graduated from amateur photographer to full-time stalker, parking outside the boys' school with surveillance equipment. Yesterday, other parents started asking uncomfortable questions, and now Jake and Michael are convinced everyone thinks we're criminals. That's when this stops being about petty politics and starts being about protecting my kids. Weekend research reveals the beautiful scope of their operation. Karen's next-door posts are a masterclass in coded defamation, concerning commercial activities, protecting established property values, maintaining neighborhood character. She never mentions names, but the timing coincides perfectly with every family she's targeted. Back when I was investigating pyramid schemes, we called this pattern recognition. Same methods, same targets, same results. Public records tell an even better story. 8 properties in Oakwood Meadows sold below market value after intensive HOA harassment. Mrs. Rodriguez fills in the details over coffee, her spoon clinking against ceramic as she stirs in cream. The Williams family was so lovely. He worked construction, she was a teacher, had 3 beautiful children, started getting fined for everything. Toys in the yard, work truck parked overnight, even their vegetable garden was somehow a violation. Sold $40,000 under asking just to escape the harassment. The Williams family was black, the Patels were Indian, the Gonzalez family was Mexican. The pattern so obvious it practically has neon signs pointing at systematic discrimination. Tuesday brings the smoking gun. Derek Morrison approaches me at the grocery store parking lot, cigarette smoke creating a nervous cloud around his twitchy energy. "David, can we talk man to man?" He offers to make my problems disappear for $3,000 cash, claims Karen's under pressure from the board and acting irrationally. But if I don't cooperate, things will get much worse for my family. The way he delivers this threat, glancing around like we're conducting a drug deal, tells me everything about their previous negotiations. Here's where I make my move. Instead of telling him to go to hell, I act interested. $3,000 seems steep. What exactly does that cover? While he's explaining their services, reduced fines, no more inspections, Derek backing off the surveillance, I'm recording every word on my phone. He mentions previous situations that worked out for everyone involved, basically confessing to systematic extortion. But the real jackpot comes when he starts bragging about their success rate. Turns out they've been running this scam for 4 years, targeting families who don't fit the community profile. His exact words. When I ask what that means, he gets uncomfortably specific about keeping the neighborhood a certain way and making sure property values reflect the right demographics. Civil rights violations, conspiracy, extortion, financial fraud. This conversation is like Christmas morning for a federal prosecutor. Wednesday evening, things take a darker turn. Michael texts that Derek's outside their school again, this time with professional camera equipment pointed at the student parking lot. When I arrive, I find this grown man photographing teenagers getting into cars, telephoto lens focused on kids who look younger than my sons. I approach his rusted Camaro, which smells like desperation and energy drinks, and tap the window. Afternoon, Derek, documenting the local wildlife. He rolls down the window, immediately defensive. I'm conducting authorized security patrols. Perfectly legal. Security patrols of a high school using telephoto photography of minors. I let that hang in the air like smoke from his cigarettes. You know what most people call that behavior? His face goes sheet white. That's not what I'm doing. Then explain what you are doing, because from where I'm standing, this looks like stalking behavior involving children. The word children hits him like a physical blow. He starts stammering about community safety and HOA protocols, but we both know there's no legal justification for what he's doing. Here's the beautiful part. While he's trying to explain away his creepy surveillance operation, I'm getting it all on video. Every admission, every pathetic excuse, every moment of panic when he realizes how this looks to any reasonable person. By the time I walk away, Derek's already packing up his equipment and speeding off like his license is suspended. Thursday afternoon, I'm sitting in the state attorney general's office doing what every good forensic accountant does when financial crimes get too big for local jurisdiction, escalating to federal authorities. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead while I spread HOA financial documents across a conference table that's probably seen thousands of fraud cases just like this one. What I discover makes my coffee taste like cardboard. Karen Blackwell has been operating a systematic embezzlement scheme disguised as HOA management for 4 years. The official state filings show consistent discrepancies between reported income and documented expenses, suggesting someone's been skimming assessment payments and inflating operating costs to hide the theft. My forensic analysis reveals $127,000 in unaccounted funds over 48 months. Money that should have gone toward actual community improvements sitting in personal accounts controlled by someone with no more financial oversight than a lemonade stand operator. Every threatening letter about liens backed by stolen money. Every fine for grass height or garage usage, funding a criminal enterprise. Every security assessment and enforcement action. Fraud disguised as community service. The scope of Karen's operation becomes crystal clear, and it's both brilliant and completely illegal. Target vulnerable families, working parents too busy to challenge financial irregularities, minorities who might not understand their rights, elderly residents who trust authority figures. Squeeze them with fraudulent fines until they pay or flee, then benefit from reduced property values when houses sell below market rates. It's the perfect crime, except for one tiny detail. She picked the wrong mark this time. I'm gathering up the financial evidence when the state investigator, a woman who's probably seen every kind of embezzlement scheme imaginable, notices my expression. Find what you were looking for? More than I expected, I tell her, and it's the truth. I came here thinking I was dealing with an overzealous HOA president. Instead, I've uncovered a systematic financial fraud operation that's been running for years under everyone's noses, including trained investigators. The irony tastes bitter as cold coffee. While Karen's been so worried about what illegal activities I might be involved in, all those suspicious motorcycles and mysterious meetings, she's been operating a criminal enterprise right under the nose of a federal forensic accountant. Those bikes that made her so paranoid? Just hobby restorations? Those meetings that seemed so sinister? Friends helping with carburetors and electrical work. But what she's been doing, embezzlement, fraud, civil rights violations, conspiracy, that's the real crime here. For the first time since this nightmare started, I'm not playing defense. The investigation is on, and I've got everything needed to dismantle her entire operation. The only question now is whether to let the feds handle it quietly or turn it into a public lesson that every wannabe financial criminal in the state will remember. Looking at Michael's latest text about Derek skulking around their school, the decision makes itself. Friday morning, I'm in the federal building before the coffee's even finished brewing, building a financial crime case that'll make Karen wish she'd stuck to legitimate real estate investments. The scent of fresh grounds mixing with morning air reminds me of every early morning analysis session I've ever worked, except this time I'm hunting someone who's been stealing right under my nose. First call goes to Agent Patricia Santos, FBI financial crimes specialist, who gets genuinely excited about complex embezzlement schemes, the kind of federal agent who reads money laundering statutes for fun. When I explain about the systematic assessment fraud and discriminatory enforcement patterns, her response comes through the phone like Christmas morning. Holy shit, David, this could set precedent for HOA fraud prosecutions nationwide. We're talking organized financial crimes, civil rights violations, maybe even RICO if we can prove criminal enterprise. I can hear that particular excitement in her voice that comes from stumbling across a case that'll make headlines and advance careers. Next stop, U.S. Attorney Rebecca Walsh, who spent 15 years putting financial criminals behind bars before moving to federal prosecution. When I walk into her office and spread out Mrs. Rodriguez's documentation, Rebecca starts grinning like a shark, smelling blood in the water. David, this could be the largest HOA embezzlement case in state history. How many confirmed victims? 34 families, probably more hiding in shame. The number tastes bitter when I say it out loud, knowing each one represents a family financially abused by their own neighborhood association. While I'm coordinating prosecution strategy, an unexpected MVP emerges. Mrs. Rodriguez shows up at my door Saturday morning carrying a banker's box thick as a phone book, wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose obsessive record-keeping finally has a purpose. "I've been documenting everything," she announces, settling into my kitchen chair like she's been waiting years for this moment. Her financial documentation would make any forensic accountant jealous. Spreadsheets tracking assessment discrepancies, copies of fraudulent billing statements, even photos of Derek's surveillance equipment. The smell of her coffee mixes with morning air as she spreads papers across my table like she's conducting a federal audit. "I knew something was wrong when they assessed us $500 for emergency road repairs, but I never saw any construction work," she says, pointing to highlighted entries in her meticulous records. The financial fraud patterns practically jump off her pages. Working families hit with multiple assessments, while Karen's investor friends somehow qualify for hardship deferrals. Single mothers getting fined for excessive utility usage, while married couples with identical consumption get friendly payment plans. It's like a textbook case of financial discrimination, except the textbook would call it criminal conspiracy. Michael becomes our best intelligence asset without even knowing it. Teenagers see everything adults miss, and his friends have been documenting Derek's stalking behavior for weeks through social media. "Dad, Emma's got like 50 photos of that creepy guy at school. And Jake's neighbor says his mom got charged $300 for landscape compliance violations, but their yard looks exactly like everyone else's." Sunday afternoon strategy session feels like planning a major financial crimes bust. Rebecca, Patricia, and I spread evidence across the conference room table where I've analyzed corporate embezzlement and securities fraud. But this feels more personal somehow, more satisfying. "Here's our prosecution timeline," Rebecca says, her federal prosecutor instincts in full gear. Criminal charges for embezzlement and conspiracy, civil asset forfeiture to recover stolen funds, federal civil rights investigation, state regulatory violations. We're going to hit her from every possible angle. The beauty of our plan lies in its precision. Instead of quiet arrests and sealed indictments, we're going full public spectacle. Karen's called an emergency community meeting for Wednesday night, planning to demand my family's removal from the neighborhood through a special assessment vote. Perfect setting for maximum financial humiliation. "You want to arrest her in front of everyone she's been stealing from?" Patricia asks, practically bouncing in her chair with federal agent excitement. "Poetic justice, plus we'll have all the victims present as witnesses to her financial confession." Mrs. Rodriguez becomes our neighborhood intelligence coordinator, organizing coffee meetings and casual conversations to document final fraud attempts. "I'm telling everyone this is their chance to finally address HOA financial concerns," she says with barely contained glee, not knowing she's helping coordinate the biggest embezzlement takedown in county history. Tuesday brings final preparations that rival any major financial crimes operation. Plainclothes agents positioned around the community center. Search warrants signed and ready for financial records. Evidence boxes packed like we're moving an accounting firm. Federal HOA investigators coordinated for simultaneous raids on bank accounts and financial documents. The technical setup includes hidden cameras to document everything, audio recording equipment tested multiple times, and media contacts alerted but not tipped off to specifics. I've run complex fraud investigations, but nothing felt as precisely choreographed as this suburban financial takedown. Jake and Michael are staying with their mother Tuesday night, partly for safety, mostly because I don't want them seeing their father in full federal witness mode. "Dad, are you finally going to arrest that stalker guy?" Jake asks, and the hope in his voice makes everything worth it. "That and a whole lot more, son." By Tuesday night, 4 years of systematic embezzlement is about to unravel in one perfectly orchestrated evening. Karen thinks she's finally cornering her problem resident with financial pressure. What she doesn't realize is that she's walking into the most public financial downfall any neighborhood criminal has ever experienced. Monday morning arrives with Karen in full financial warfare mode. A certified letter appears in every mailbox announcing an emergency assessment of $2,500 per household, due within 96 hours. The official-looking document claims the money's needed for immediate legal action against a non-compliant resident who threatens community financial stability and property values. $2,500 to fund her war against me. The letter includes a breakdown of supposed legal expenses, attorney fees, court filing costs, financial consultation services, expert witness testimony. It's all fiction, but the letterhead and financial language look convincing enough to panic most residents into immediate payment. Mrs. Rodriguez calls me within an hour, voice shaking with anxiety. "David, people are talking about taking out loans to pay this assessment just to make the problem go away." That's exactly what Karen's counting on, community financial pressure to force me out rather than everyone paying thousands to fund her fake legal battle. But her desperation's showing through her financial strategy. The timeline's too aggressive, the amount too large, the justification too vague. She's making the kind of mistakes that trip up embezzlers when they get too greedy too fast. Tuesday brings the neighborhood financial revolt she didn't expect. Next door explodes with angry posts about the emergency assessment. Residents demanding financial transparency, questioning the legal basis, asking why they need to pay for someone else's dispute. The tide's turning and Karen's losing control of her own financial narrative. Her response is predictably unhinged. She posts a lengthy financial manifesto about outside agitators and residents who don't understand community economics, claims she has substantial documentation of illegal business activities that justify extreme financial measures. The paranoia in her writing is so obvious that even her financial supporters start backing away. Wednesday morning, Derek escalates to full financial stalker mode. He's not just photographing my property anymore, he's sitting in his Camaro at the end of my driveway with what looks like professional surveillance equipment, taking detailed photos of every delivery truck, every visitor, every motorcycle that enters or leaves my garage. When I leave for work, he follows at a distance, probably documenting my business meetings and commercial activities. The amateur hour surveillance would be hilarious if it wasn't targeting my family's financial reputation. I've investigated actual money laundering operations with better fieldcraft than this wannabe financial investigator, but his incompetence works in my favor. Every stalking incident gets documented, every privacy invasion recorded for the federal prosecution file. Every attempted intimidation becomes evidence of systematic harassment designed to force financial compliance through fear. Michael texts me from school. "Dad, creepy guy is back with binoculars and a notebook." The photo he sends shows Derek positioned across from the high school entrance, telephoto lens, and detailed notes visible through his windshield. The sight of this grown man surveilling teenagers with professional equipment makes my blood pressure spike into dangerous territory. When I drive over during lunch break, I find him in full financial paparazzi mode. Long lens focused on the student parking lot, notebook in hand, taking what appears to be detailed surveillance notes about kids getting into cars, probably documenting commercial activities he thinks he sees in a high school parking lot. Afternoon Derek, conducting financial analysis of teenage driving habits? He startles so hard he nearly drops his camera and notebook. I'm conducting authorized financial security assessments of potential threats to community property values. Financial security assessments of children at a public school. I let the words hang in the air like smoke from his chain-smoking habit. You know what that sounds like to most people. His face goes pale as a failed audit report. That's not what I'm doing. Then explain exactly what you are doing, because from where I'm standing, this looks like predatory financial stalking behavior involving minors. The word predatory hits him like a failed background check. He starts stammering about HOA financial protocols and community economic safety standards. But here's the beautiful part. While he's defending his creepy financial surveillance operation, I'm recording everything on my phone. Not just his pathetic excuses, but the equipment in his car, the detailed notes about children, the systematic documentation of my family's activities. "This surveillance equipment," I say, gesturing at his telephoto setup and financial notebooks. "How much did the HOA budget for professional financial investigation services?" "It's my personal equipment." "Personal equipment that you're using to financially investigate children for an organization that pays you how much per week?" He can't answer because there's no good answer. Every question exposes another layer of the illegal financial operation he's participating in. By the time I walk away, Derek's packing up his stalker kit faster than an embezzler shredding documents. Wednesday evening, the final piece falls into place. Karen announces the emergency community meeting via robocalls, her voice dripping with artificial financial concern about addressing the ongoing economic situation that threatens our neighborhood's fiscal stability and property values. She's planning her financial grand finale, public humiliation designed to force my family out through community economic pressure. What she doesn't know is that half the residents are already questioning her financial authority, and the other half are about to witness the most spectacular embezzlement downfall in HOA history. Every fraudulent assessment, every illegal fine, every stalking incident has built toward this moment. Tomorrow night, 4 years of systematic financial fraud unravels in front of the entire community she's been stealing from. Karen thinks she's finally cornering her problem resident with economic warfare. Instead, she's walking into a federal trap that'll make her wish she'd never heard of financial crimes. Wednesday evening, hours before the financial showdown, Karen launches her final economic warfare campaign. Robocalls start hitting every household at dinner time with her voice dripping fake fiscal concern. Due to escalating financial threats from a non-compliant resident, tonight's emergency meeting will address immediate action to protect our community's economic stability and property values. Financial threats. She's painting me as some kind of economic criminal to justify whatever financial manipulation she's planning for tonight's meeting. The calls include warnings about bringing financial documentation and being prepared to vote on emergency fiscal enforcement measures. She's setting up a financial kangaroo court designed to publicly exile my family from the neighborhood through economic intimidation. An hour later, Derek begins his most aggressive financial intimidation campaign yet. He parks directly across from my house, engine running, high beams pointed at my front windows. The diesel rumble and bright lights create an atmosphere of economic siege that's clearly designed to rattle my nerves before the meeting. Michael peers out through the blinds, his face tight with anxiety. "Dad, this is getting really scary." He's right, but not for the reason he thinks. What's scary is how far Karen and Derek are willing to go to maintain their financial fraud. The stalking, the harassment, the economic threats. They're acting like cornered embezzlers, which makes them unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Around 8 p.m., my phone starts buzzing with concerned neighbors. Mrs. Rodriguez calls first. "David, Karen's been going door to door telling people you're some kind of financial criminal who needs to be removed for everyone's economic safety." Then Mrs. Patterson, "She showed me photos of motorcycles at your house, claiming it proves illegal business activity that threatens property values." The door-to-door campaign reveals Karen's desperation and her strategic mistake. She's so focused on demonizing me financially that she's forgotten how paranoid and controlling she appears to reasonable people. Mrs. Peterson mentions that Karen demanded to come inside and inspect for signs of commercial financial activity. Several neighbors found her behavior aggressive and intrusive. "She kept asking about my son's part-time job," Mrs. Patterson tells me, her voice shaking slightly. "Wanted to know if he's involved in your illegal business network. The way she looked at our family photos made me very uncomfortable." The economic undertones aren't subtle. Karen's targeting working families and minorities with special intensity, suggesting they might be compromised by association with my alleged financial crimes. Around 9 p.m., the real economic intimidation begins. Derek's joined by two other men I don't recognize, both sitting in a pickup truck with tinted windows. They position themselves at opposite ends of the street, creating a financial surveillance triangle around my house. The smell of cigarette smoke drifts through my kitchen window as they take turns getting out to smoke and stretch, making sure I see them watching my commercial activities. Here's where I make my counter move. Instead of hiding inside like they expect, I step onto my front porch with a cup of coffee and wave cheerfully at each surveillance position. The casual confidence clearly rattles them. They were expecting financial fear, not friendly acknowledgement of their amateur hour economic stakeout. I pull out my phone and start taking photos of their vehicles, license plates, and faces. When Derek notices what I'm doing, he actually gets out of his car and approaches my property line. "Sir, you need to stop photographing us. We're conducting official financial security operations." Official financial security operations in a public street using unlicensed personnel. I take another photo of him standing there with his fake badge and Halloween costume authority. "You know what's interesting about public streets, Derek? Anyone can photograph anything they want, especially suspected financial crimes." His backup team gets nervous and drives away, leaving him alone to face the reality that his economic intimidation tactics just became evidence of financial stalking and harassment. The twist is beautiful. Their attempt to scare me before the meeting backfires spectacularly, giving me fresh footage of their criminal financial behavior. By 10 p.m., Karen makes her final financial mistake. She calls my house directly, her voice tight with barely controlled economic rage. "Mr. Chen, I know what you're trying to do financially, but it won't work. Tomorrow night, this community will vote you out economically, and you'll have no choice but to sell and leave." Is that a financial threat, Karen? It's an economic promise. We have legal authority to force financially non-compliant residents out of this neighborhood, and we're prepared to use it. Every word is being recorded, every financial threat documented for the federal prosecution file. Legal authority based on what exactly? The pause stretches long enough for me to hear her breathing become rapid and shallow. "Based on our authority as the duly elected HOA board and our responsibility to protect this community's financial standards." Duly elected HOA board managing a systematic embezzlement operation with no legitimate financial oversight whatsoever. "I look forward to tomorrow night's meeting," I tell her. "Should be very educational for everyone involved, especially regarding financial crimes." After she hangs up, I sit on my porch finishing my coffee while Derek maintains his pathetic surveillance from across the street. The night air carries the sound of his engine idling and the distant hum of highway traffic. But underneath it all, I can practically hear the countdown timer ticking toward tomorrow's explosive financial finale. 24 hours from now, Karen's 4-year embezzlement spree ends in the most public way possible. Thursday evening, 7:30 p.m. sharp, I walk into the Oakwood Meadows Community Center wearing civilian clothes and my best defeated expression. The place is packed, 70-plus residents filling every folding chair, standing room only along the back wall. The air smells like burnt coffee from an ancient percolator and nervous financial anticipation from people who have no idea they're about to witness the most spectacular embezzlement takedown in suburban history. Karen's positioned herself at the front like she's chairing the Federal Reserve, complete with a podium she must have rented for the occasion. Her designer blazer catches the harsh fluorescent lights as she shuffles through a stack of official-looking financial documents. Derek stands guard at the entrance in his fake uniform, clipboard in hand, like he's checking credentials for some kind of exclusive economic summit. I spot Agent Santos sitting 3 rows back, looking like any other concerned resident. Patricia's positioned near the side exit, phone ready to coordinate the federal arrests. Mrs. Rodriguez gives me an almost imperceptible nod from her front row seat, her banker's box of evidence sitting innocently beside her chair. Karen calls the meeting to order with all the pomp her inflated ego can muster. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to address a serious financial threat to our community's economic stability and property values. For months, we've documented disturbing commercial activities at 412 Oak Street that require immediate fiscal action. She launches into a PowerPoint presentation that would be impressive if it wasn't complete financial fiction. Photos of motorcycles at my house, men with tools conducting suspicious business meetings, charts showing the correlation between my residency and decreased neighborhood economic security. The projection screen flickers as she clicks through slides labeled Evidence of Commercial Activity and Community Financial Protection Protocols. Based on our financial investigation, she continues, her voice building to prosecutor-level intensity, we have substantial evidence that Mr. Chen is operating an illegal automotive repair business from his residence, conducting commercial activities incompatible with residential zoning and creating ongoing economic risks for our families. The crowd murmurs with financial concern. Several residents nod along, buying into her economic narrative completely. Mrs. Patterson looks worried, probably wondering if her suspicions about my mysterious profession were justified. Therefore, Karen announces with dramatic financial flair, the HOA board is prepared to take immediate action. We're demanding that Mr. Chen pay accumulated assessments totaling $12,000 and cease all illegal commercial activities within 14 days, or face forced sale of his property through lien foreclosure. $12,000. The number hangs in the air like smoke from Derek's cigarettes. Multiple residents gasp audibly. Someone in the back shouts, "That seems excessive for motorcycle repair." But Karen raises her hand for financial silence. Mr. Chen, would you like to address these serious economic allegations before we proceed to a community vote? This is it, the moment 4 years of systematic embezzlement finally catches up with her. I stand slowly, playing the defeated victim one last time, and walk to the front of the room. Every eye follows me as I approach the podium where Karen stands with triumphant financial satisfaction written across her face. Ma'am, before I respond to these allegations, I'd like to ask one simple question. I pull out my phone and set it on the podium, recording everything. Can you provide documentation that this HOA has been properly managing community funds according to state financial regulations? Karen's confident smile falters slightly. Of course we manage funds properly. We're the duly elected board of the Oakwood Meadows Homeowners Association. And when did you last file accurate financial statements with the state? The silence stretches long enough for the air conditioning to kick on with a mechanical whir. Karen's blazer crinkles as she shifts her weight, suddenly looking less financially confident. Mr. Chen, you're clearly trying to delay the inevitable with accounting technicalities. It's not a technicality, it's a simple question about financial compliance. When did you last submit accurate expense reports that match your actual spending? Her face goes pale as a failed audit. The room erupts in confused murmurs as residents realize something significant is happening that they don't understand financially. That's when I reach into my jacket and pull out my federal credentials, setting them on the podium next to my phone. The badge catches the fluorescent light as gasps echo throughout the room. Ma'am, I'm David Chen, certified public accountant and forensic investigator specializing in financial crimes. My voice carries the full authority I've been hiding for months. You're under arrest for embezzlement, systematic fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The explosion of shocked voices fills the community center as I continue reading her Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law regarding financial crimes. Karen's mouth opens and closes like a fish out of water. This is impossible. You can't be... This is a financial setup. Agent Santos and Patricia move through the crowd, federal badges visible, positioning themselves for Derek's arrest. The wannabe security guard looks around frantically, realizing his fake financial authority just evaporated in the most public way possible. The Oakwood Meadows HOA has been operating with systematic financial irregularities for 4 years, I announced to the stunned crowd. Every assessment, every fine, every financial threat you've received has been part of a systematic embezzlement operation. The community center erupts like a financial bomb went off as Agent Santos slaps federal handcuffs on Karen while she screams about illegal financial entrapment. The metallic click of cuffs echoes through the room as Derek tries bolting for the exit, only to run face first into Patricia's waiting arms. Ladies and gentlemen, I address the stunned crowd, federal credentials gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights. For 4 years, you've been victims of systematic financial fraud. Every assessment, every fine, every economic threat has been completely illegal embezzlement. Mrs. Rodriguez rises like an avenging angel clutching her banker's box. I documented every fraudulent financial penalty. Mrs. Patterson's $600 assessment for landscape compliance. Theft. The Johnson Special Evaluation for excessive utility usage. Criminal financial extortion. The revelations cascade through the room as residents pull out phones comparing notes about economic harassment they thought they had to endure. Within hours, forensic accountant exposes massive HOA embezzlement becomes national news. The dramatic arrest footage spreads across every financial platform, making me an accidental hero in America's war against neighborhood financial tyranny. Interview requests flood in from reporters fascinated by a story about patience, investigation, and letting financial criminals provide their own evidence. The legal resolution unfolds beautifully. Karen gets 7 years plus full restitution. Derek receives probation and restraining orders keeping him 500 feet from schools. Most importantly, we recover $127,000 for the 34 families they systematically robbed, money that pays for home repairs, college funds, and medical bills that victims struggled with while paying bogus assessments. But the real transformation happens in Oakwood Meadows itself. Mrs. Rodriguez becomes president of our new, legitimately managed HOA, immediately abolishing punitive financial assessments and focusing on actual community improvements. The sound of children playing replaces the economic tension that hung over our streets like storm clouds. Mrs. Patterson plants her liberation garden right in the front yard, tomatoes, peppers, and herbs that she shares with anyone wanting fresh vegetables. The earthy smell of rich soil and growing things replaces the artificial perfume of Karen's financial intimidation campaigns. Michael organizes block parties where teenagers actually want to hang out instead of hiding from surveillance. 6 months later, I launched the HOA Financial Transparency Program with the State Attorney General. We create online resources helping residents verify their association's financial status and recognize embezzlement patterns. Here's your practical takeaway. Always demand detailed financial statements from your HOA and verify their numbers with state filings before paying any assessment over $100. The crown jewel of our community healing is the Oakwood Scholarship Foundation, funded entirely with recovered embezzlement money. This year alone, we're sending 6 local kids to college, including Emma, whose family Karen nearly drove out with financial harassment. Watching Emma open her acceptance letter to State University, knowing her family can afford it thanks to financial justice served, makes every sleepless night of this investigation worthwhile. Speaking at accounting conferences nationwide, I share the lesson this case taught. Sometimes the best forensic work involves patience, documentation, and letting financial criminals hang themselves with their own fraudulent paperwork. The story becomes required reading for fraud investigation courses, proving that living in the community you protect financially gives you advantages no outside auditor ever could. Our annual Oakwood Community Festival, held exactly 1 year after Karen's arrest, draws families from 3 counties. The smell of grilled burgers mixes with Mrs. Patterson's garden vegetables, as kids play freely in yards where toys are finally allowed. Veterans like Tom march with their service dogs in our little parade, celebrated instead of financially penalized. Those fake assessment notices that started this nightmare? We turned them into paper for the community recycling program, transformed from financial weapons into something actually useful. Sometimes the sweetest revenge really is living well and making sure financial justice gets served with maximum public satisfaction. The best part? 4 other HOAs in our county got exposed and shut down after residents saw our story and checked their own association's financial records. Turns out Karen wasn't the only neighborhood Napoleon running a long-term embezzlement scheme. Looking back, I'm grateful she picked the wrong target because sometimes financial karma needs a little help from someone with a CPA license and 15 years of fraud investigation experience. Drop your own HOA financial nightmare stories in the comments. I read every single one, and some make Karen look like a petty shoplifter. And if this story inspired you to check your HOA's financial statements, or just gave you hope that financial bullies eventually face federal consequences, hit that subscribe button for more HOA stories. We've got dozens more tales where petty financial tyrants get exactly what they deserve. Trust me, financial justice never tasted this sweet. That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA financial horror stories. If you enjoyed watching economic karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA financial madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA financial meltdown we expose.